Try this again. Instagram just kicked us off. We were in the middle of our good live that we were doing. Yes, ma'am. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay. I'm not sure how to.
You just have to flip it around.
Okay.
Uh-oh. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We're back. I don't know what happened. The Instagram just kicked us off.
Fine. That's okay. That happens.
Yes, but I got the other one saved, so it's on there. So we're good with that. Daggone it. Where were we at?
You were asking me.
Yes, Kristen, we're back. Oh, yes, ma'am. And what I was saying before we got disconnected was sometimes, there's different types of abuse, physical and mental. And a lot of times mental abuse can be just as bad, if not worse, as physical abuse.
Right.
And I remember when I was a child, my mom's mouth was reckless. I mean, she called me the N-word religiously. She didn't want to have me. She wished she had an abortion, all kinds of stuff, And I'm like, for the longest time, I always wished that I was being physically abused as far as like being beat on, because my mentality was the bruises will heal. Right. But the mental was driving me nuts, and they sent me to a therapist. So that's why I was, and the good thing was I was able to, he had things set up, and he had a corner, and it had a punching bag in it. So, and he bought the punching bag specifically for me because I was so angry, and I just hated my parents, Not so much my dad that raised me. I hated him for different reasons than I hated my mom. I hated my mom because she was just an evil woman. I mean, just evil. But I hated him because he allowed her to be evil, So that's why I was so mad at him. But they end up putting me in therapy, and I literally would just go in there to hit the punching bag.
Right.
We really didn't even talk about too much of anything. For 45 minutes, he just let me kick and hit that bag.
Oh, that's sweet.
We talked a little bit, but not a whole lot. But that's why I was wondering, what age were you when you went to seek therapy?
I was older, so I was like in my 30s.
Yeah. Okay, so you had waited a little bit. Later. Me too. Once I got older.
Right. Right. Yes. And of course, family thinks you're crazy and all that stuff, but you're not. You're just basically, allowing someone to not only validate you as a human being, but you're also allowing someone to give you information about, looking at it from a different perspective. Right. Not dismissing what we went through, of course, but, just letting us to look at ourselves and how our reactions and actions towards the harm that we've encountered, how it's kind of like what I call a slow death, Right. When we're constantly putting ourselves down, maybe involving ourselves in risky behavior and things like that. It's just a slow suicidal death that we're doing. And we need to be able to recognize.
Yes. Yes, ma'am, we do. Okay, let's see. Miss Jenkins. Uh-oh, wait a minute. I got to go back. Hold on, guys. I exited out of it by accident. Hopefully I can pull it up. No, I cannot. So Miss Jenkins had said that it happened to her when she was 8 years old. Okay. So, sorry to hear that. 8 years old that's young, I don't like abuse of any type, but when it's young children, I don't know. It's so much different.
It is
when it's a young child, Right. But I'm glad you went to therapy, and I hope. I went to therapy that young. She was 8 years old in therapy. Wow.
Yeah.
That's young to have to be in therapy, but I'm glad you were there.
Right.
And I hope it helped.
Right.
Did therapy at 8 years old help you? I hope it did.
Mm-hmm.
So you went to therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and did therapy help, or did you later on down the road do something different and that helped? Because, okay, I learned it's not what happened, it's how you respond. Nice.
That's true.
That is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did your therapy help you?
Yes, it did help me, and it helped me
Good.
for the same reason that Miss Jenkins said, is because it allowed you to look within yourself, and to think about that, if someone doesn't like you over here and they mistreat you over here, yes, they have a problem, okay?
Right.
But you don't have to focus your energy on trying to fix them or focus your energy on trying to make them to see you for who you really are. I always tell people, we limit ourselves in so many ways that we have this audience that we're trying to get to accept us for who we are, when there's this big old world over here of people that will accept us just the way we are. And
Right.
that's what they call those toxic relationships, because any type of violence in the home is a toxic relationship.
Yes.
And that's why they say 3.3 million all the way to 10 million children witness violence on a yearly basis. That's a lot of children.
That's terrible. That is a lot of children.
Yeah.
A lot of kids. So now, is there other things that works for you aside from like going to a therapist? I know there's a lot of holistic people out there that are doing different types of therapies, and then there's group therapies, there's one-on-one therapy. What did you find within your therapy that just really worked for you?
Well, one of the things that I found that really worked for me, because I think that as you're healing, you need to give back to other people and help them, okay? And because it'll take us many years, I should say, before we actually become healed to the point that we accept ourselves. And because we're so critical of ourselves, we'll never help ourselves, okay?
Right.
But I think what really helped me, there was several things. One is it took me to an avenue to work for a domestic violence shelter, not the one I started, but another one. And we went to a candlelight vigil, because every October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so I had, once again, kept everything hidden, everything quiet. And we had this kind of like visual, and we were told to name people, it could have included ourselves, that have been victimized in the past. And my reaction to that was really unusual for me, and that was as I started crying and said, it wasn't my fault, it wasn't my fault. And I had been working at this job for quite a while, and my coworkers didn't know that I was a victim, and they were just like really shocked to see that. So that helped me, because that allowed me to open up, and tell pieces of my story. And then from there, what I did is I used to do groups in the community for women, support groups. And those are just, what I call something that are places where people can go if they can't afford therapy. They can go to their local support group. And so by myself facilitating it, not only did I hear my story over and over and over and over again, but it was also refreshing to see how the women that came to these groups and to see their growth, how they started saying something positive about themselves, how some of them were able just to say, you know what, no more, and actually walk out of the situation. But then there was others that just basically, you could just see the light in their eyes, and that just kind of encouraged me a lot, to be able to grow myself and to see myself for who I really am. And then another thing that helped me was, of course, my faith belief. And I had a really neat pastor that just basically said that domestic violence was a sin. And that's all I needed to have heard. Because many pastors and many people of God will tell you to go stay in it, pray a little harder and fast and all that good stuff. Which I'm not saying I don't believe in that things, but, to have a man of God, especially African-American man of God,
Yeah.
say publicly, not just to me, but to the whole church congregation, that domestic violence was a sin. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yes.
So yeah.
That was nice to hear. I'm
Yes,
sure. Because
yes.
there's a lot of them that do not feel that way.
Right.
I know my side of the family, they're Southern Baptists,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they definitely didn't feel that way. Stick it out. You
Right.
need to stick it out.
Right.
I'm like,
Exactly. Yeah.
no, but my mom was the same way, when
Right.
something, when things were going not so good in my marriage, she was like, no, you need to stay. No,
Right. Right.
for what?
Right.
I mean, I wasn't being physically abused, but at the same time, the marriage is not working.
Right.
Why am I going? Why am I going to stay? So let me read a couple of comments, because people have been commenting in the comments. So when you guys see me looking down, I'm on my other phone from my other account, and I'm commenting back in the comments. And so let's see. Miss Jenkins from Public Health says, advocating among peers and family that trauma should not be normalized.
Mm-hmm.
And Kristen said, it hits at unexpected moments. Forever Open Journal says, that's good. Serving others helped me a lot. And JRMT Consulting, each time the trauma is talked about, it's almost like reliving it. I commend all of you for rising above and surviving it. The trauma does not define you. You all are resilient and strong. Many blessings, and God bless. Thank you, sis. And the reliving the trauma, and she's right about that. And that's one thing that when we talk about it, and we talk about it over and over again, it is reliving it. We have to, at some point, I have not mastered it yet. So I can, I'm just keeping it 100, because every time I bring up, things, it bothers me still. So I'm still trying to work on not allowing it to have so much power over me. And it's easier said than done. Because when you've dealt with it for so long, and that's where I go back to that mental abuse. When you're called names for so long, you get into your adult life and you're thinking the same stuff, and you're trying to work through it the best you can. And therapy's not for everybody. It's not. So that's why I like that there are so many different things out here. You have the support groups, that are just people that are coming together, and they're getting it off their chest. And they may have never, ever told anybody else, and they may never, ever tell anybody else except for that support group. The good thing is you're getting it out. It's a release. You're unpacking all of that luggage. And so I'm super, super glad, that you signed up so you could talk about it, and so people could hear your story, and also, want to step out of their comfort zone. What is that saying? Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's essentially what a mental health Monday is. You have to get comfortable because you're about to be very uncomfortable, and I commend you for all of your hard work and for what you have accomplished over the years, and the fact that you stepped into social work, because at the end of the day, you're needed. People like you are needed in our community. We need social workers that look like us, that are going to go to bat for us. Because because there's a lot of social workers out there. It's just a paycheck to them.
Right.
But our community, and I don't know why we're this way, but we're so compassionate. We're so loving and caring, despite everything we've been through.
Right.
You know, we are some of the most loving people, and everybody needs to see it. You know, we need to help each other and talk about things so we can be a better community to us. And, you know, so we can unpack everything that hasn't been unpacked over all of these years. And the fact that you made a shelter, kudos to you, for that, because I don't think we have enough of shelters out here for battered women. And the fact that one thing that stood out to me, and also thank you for this, the fact that you allowed teenage boys, because I don't know how many ladies that over the years I've tried to help get into shelters and they had kids. They would let their daughters come, but their sons could not come. How can you let the mother and her two daughters come, but you're saying her son is going to have to be out in the street? You know, and I know, unfortunately, a lot of women that didn't make it in shelters and end up, you know, on the street temporarily because they couldn't get into a shelter because they had a teenage son. And then there were some other shelters that would allow the sons, but they could not be there, you know, under over the age of 10. You know. So thank you for allowing the sons to come, because it's hard on a parent to have to make a decision. You know, what do I do with my son? Do I stay here with my two daughters and my son has to sleep on the street, or do we all as a collective whole sleep on the street? You know, so and battered women should not have to make those type of decisions. They're already in a bad enough situation that they're running from, you know. And what I do love is the underground railroad that they've kind of made for the domestic violence victims. And I was able to be a part of an extraction, so to speak. A woman reached out to me in California, and she needed to get away from her husband. And so I reached out. She was trying to get to New York, and then she was going to try to get here to Virginia. The strategic things that were set in place to get all of this in motion, I have goosebumps just talking about it, because these ladies that do this, they are strategic. You know, they were like, you've got to leave this, you've got to leave that. You know, they gave me, I put up a post and I said, I need help. I have a domestic violence young lady that is trying to get away. The ladies that hit my DM, they were all in the same organization. Each one of them was a strategic component to get her from California to New York, from New York to Virginia. It was so many moving parts.
That's sweet.
But to watch this all unfold was amazing. You know, she kind of didn't listen, which threw it all out of whack, because she was told when she left California, you need to get a burner phone. You leave your phone in California. You can't take that phone with you. She left her phone, but she didn't pay attention to her kids' phones.
Oh no.
That's how she, and that's how it all unraveled. It's how it all unraveled, because the kids were on their phones, Wi-Fi, and he had money, so he was able to find her. And I lost contact with her once she got to New York. But for the ladies out there that are helping domestic violence, ladies and men, because they've helped men as well. Thank you for all that you do, you know, for the social workers that were involved, for the single moms, you know, that were involved, that were, you know, she was crowd surfing with the kids, you know, and not couch surfing, not crowd surfing, but she was couch surfing with the kids. People were opening up their home.
Right.
Let me tell you, man, and like Kristen said, the power of a woman,
Right.
the power of a woman that is trying to protect her cubs,
Right.
ain't nothing like it. There's
Yeah,
nothing like it. So kudos to you, one, for the making the shelter, you know,
right.
two, for getting into social work because you were needed.
Thank you.
You were needed and you helped so many lives.
Yes.
Are you still a social worker today?
I'm still a social worker today, but I work in the medical field side of it now. So
okay.
I'm doing that too. Yeah.
Okay. So when somebody's in the hospital and they need to talk to a social worker, that's you.
That's me. And then I also, because I work in the ER, I go to all the trauma cases. So my goal there is to help find next of kin and locate people who have to. Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So for people, what is you were a child, you dealt with abuse as a child, you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now you're an adult, a mother, you were a wife. So what's some advice that you would give somebody that may be watching this live now or maybe going to come back and watch it later? What is some advice that you would give them that they're in a situation right now that you were in? You know, what's some different advice you would give people now that you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and you've been through all that you've been through?
Right. So the advice that I would give them is to become selfish. And what I mean by that, you have to be interested in who you are. So you deserve that. Number two, I would tell you to stop being invisible. You don't deserve to be invisible. Let your voices be known. Speak out loud. Tell people who you are. And number three, I would tell people that basically it's not their fault. I don't care if you started the argument. I don't care if you threw something at that person. It's not your fault, and it never will be your fault, because there's no comparison if maybe you yelled and cussed somebody out or maybe hit them, you know, with an object, to them beating you in your black and blue. The punishment that you received does not justify what you did. So it's not your fault. You know, a lot of times we as women say that it's our fault. Number four, I would also suggest to women to be able to share their stories. Whatever piece they feel comfortable in sharing, share it. There's a variety of ways that you can share it. And one way is to journal, like someone mentioned earlier. Another way is to be able to record your voice, you know, your thoughts, you know, and of course raise it. Some people have to write what they call do not mail letters, like dear so-and-so, and just write down what they're feeling, okay? And there's a variety of things you could do with that letter. You can either keep it, you can burn it, you can shred it.
Or you can send it.
Or you can send it, exactly, yes. So we just have to, as women, learn to just believe in ourselves, to love ourselves. I know that's hard to do, but just know that, number one, you don't deserve it. No one does. I'm sorry. And for those of you that may feel like you need to stay because of your children, because you want your children to have a father figure, a mother figure, I want you to be aware of the harm that these children are internalizing because of a decision that you're making. That harm is so powerful and will stay with them for many, many, many years, up until their adulthood, unless they're fortunate to get counseling at a young age. And that harm will allow them to become a repeat performance of what they saw in their home, because we as women model how we want people to treat us. So we have to learn to set boundaries and set them early on in the relationship. I tell a person, if you can, and granted I do understand this is 2023, but when you're entering into a new relationship, try to abstain from being intimate in that relationship for 6 months. Check that person out for 6 months. Anybody can act cute and good for you for at least 3 months. But when it comes to 6 months, their true selves come out. Pay attention to how they treat other women in their life. Do they disrespect them? Do they call them names? Do they put them down? Well, guess what? You're a woman. They're going to treat you the same way, you know? And let your no mean no. You have a right to say no. If you find yourself contemplating and thank you, and changing your actions and your beliefs for this one person, why? Because what they're really telling you is that they don't accept you the way you are. And what that leads to is you become a counterfeit. What that leads to imposter syndrome. You know, is that what you really want to base this relationship on? It may last, but it's not going to be a healthy, lasting relationship.
Right.
You know, so it's about being self-interest. You know, you have to be interested in yourself. You have to model and show people and tell people what you're willing to accept. And you do not have to. My mom used to have this old saying, and I never bought into. I don't believe it intellectually, you know, but I bought into it.
Right.
But she used to always tell me, "Piece of man is better than no man at all." That is the biggest lie from the pit of hell, okay?
Biggest lie. I was told the same thing, yes.
Yes.
Biggest lie.
Yeah. And I mean, I understand being an African American, there's more single women than there are single men as available. I get that. But, you know, we really have to learn how to treat ourselves better or different than what we're treating ourselves now. Because if we treat ourselves like we're garbage, guess what? We're going to attract garbage. I'm going to say that again. If we treat ourselves like we are garbage, we are going to attract garbage. Not trying to be offensive, but that's the real world.
Yes. So Kristen said hospitals couldn't run without social workers. She's a RN, right. So. And then Miss Jenkins says, my husband hates when I say that. He is an amazing man, though. Yes. Self-love is something that I think after you've been gone through abuse, physical or mental abuse, is really hard to accomplish.
It is.
You know, it takes a lot of work.
Right.
To get to that point where you're able to say no.
Right.
You're able to say, I'm not going to do that, you know, right. Or I'm not changing that. This is who I am. Take me as I am. You know, you can't get into a relationship with somebody and claim that you love that person and you want to spend the rest of your life with that person, but then 6 months down the road you flip a switch.
Right.
Exactly. And now I don't want you wearing that, or, you know, don't say that, or who do you think you're talking to? And, you know, so when you just said all of that, you know, I'm listening to it because I got out of a relationship recently. So I'm listening to a lot of that. And that is something that I did within my relationship. I was trying to appease the other person, and I had turned into somebody who I was no longer me. Right. You know, I was no longer Sandra, the fun-loving, outspoken, you know, person, because I was being chastised, you know, by a father figure, so to speak. Right. And he's a great man, but I'm not your daughter. I'm your girlfriend. You know, I got a dad. I don't need another one, type of thing. So, it was hard. It's hard, and a lot of times we do stay longer than we should because. At the end of the day, nobody wants to be alone. And at the end of the day, everybody's looking to be loved, because a lot of us as children didn't get that love, you know, and that's what you said earlier. Right. And so, yeah, a lot of us do stay longer than we should. We get into relationships. Also, we get into relationships thinking we can fix somebody. And as I was told by my therapist, that's not my job. It's not my job to fix you. It's your job to fix you. And it took me, her beating that in my head, you know, for me to really realize that she's right, you know. So I thank you, you know, for dropping nuggets today with us. Now, if you had the ability to speak to your younger self right now today, what would you tell her?
Oh, wow. That's a real good question. Thank you for asking it. I would tell her, Deborah, you are so beautiful. Deborah, you're kind. You really are very valuable. I really want to be your friend, not your enemy. And I
Right.
want to be able to learn how to love you. I want you to learn how to love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I say. Yeah.
Wise words, wise
Yeah.
words. Now,
Thank you.
have you and Mom sat down and had a conversation
We
about everything?
I've attempted to,
Mm-hmm.
but my mom is stubborn like I am, or I'm stubborn like she is, and so that's those
Apple
conversations.
didn't fall too far from the tree, huh?
Exactly. So those have been very difficult conversations. They never really go
Right.
anywhere. So, I
Yeah.
had to have someone, a wise woman, tell me, leave it alone.
Mm-hmm.
You seek your own truth, you
That's
know. And so
right.
it kind of goes back to, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't know who my real father was, and I just recently came back from Denver today to find out who my birth father was. And my birth father is deceased, but I at least got to meet a sister.
Oh,
I'm persistent.
that is so cool. I'm so
So,
happy for you.
yes, yeah, me too.
I'm
Yes,
sorry you didn't get to meet
yeah,
Dad, but oh man, you got to
yeah,
meet your sister.
right,
And
yes, yeah,
and now did she get to grow up with Dad?
yes. So I got to
Okay,
learn a
so
lot
she
about
can.
him, you know. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
that's so cool.
yeah.
What?
So I'm really,
Yes, Kristen said, "What a blessing."
yeah.
Kristen's right outside of Denver, actually.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah,
oh, that is so cool.
yeah,
I'm really happy to hear that. I
right.
am, because everybody wants to know who they are. Who am I?
Exactly.
Where did I come from? You know?
Right.
Um, yeah, I didn't know who my biological father was, and I went looking for him, and it turned out very horrible for me. But
Right.
I, even though I was brutally raped, beaten, and left for
Mm-hmm.
dead,
Mm-hmm.
I would not change
Right.
going to look for him,
Mm-hmm.
because what came out of it was my grandma Rena, his mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And oh, she's a pistol. She was a pistol, she really was.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to meet my aunts. And I just got to meet that side of my family, and I wouldn't, if I had it to do all over again, I still would have looked for him.
Right.
I still would have did it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I wish I could change that one particular night. I really wish I could change that night,
Right.
but I can't.
Right.
But at the same time, part of me wishes I could change it. The other part of me is like, no, because that is who made you who you are today.
Right.
That night, those 6 hours changed my whole life,
Wow.
and I
Right.
know without a shadow of a doubt that if that wouldn't have happened, I'd be entirely different. I
Right.
would not be who I am today. So,
Right.
I guess we gotta take the good and the bad,
Right. Good.
but I learned a lot that night,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned that I wanted to be the best mother I could be.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Um, you I didn't want kids at first.
Right.
I never wanted kids growing up, and I didn't want kids growing up because
Mm-hmm.
of my birth giver. And I
Right.
was like, I don't want kids because I don't want to turn out like her. I don't want to be that mom,
Right. Right.
And I got pregnant at 18,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, you know what? I'm not keeping this kid, because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel that I would be a good mother because of my childhood.
Right.
But part of me was, it's not like I don't know what was going on. I was not mowing over, should I do it, shouldn't I do it? I wasn't doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like I had just forgot about it, type of thing. I just blocked it out.
Right.
So then what happened was he kicked one day. Well, the day he kicked, it's too late.
Right.
It's too late. You know, your only decision right now at this moment is you're pushing forward, and you have to figure out what you're going to do with this life growing inside of you. And so at that moment, I had to make a decision. Do you want to be her?
Right.
Or do you want to break that generational curse?
Right.
So I went from not wanting to have any kids, never babysat, growing up or nothing like that. I wanted nothing to do with kids. And I went from that to a mom of 4, you know, because the day he kicked changed my whole life, changed my whole life, you know. And I am so thankful that there was so much going on in my life at that particular moment when I found out that I was pregnant, that I forgot. I blocked it out. Because had I remembered, he might not be here. So I don't know what made me block it out, but I blocked it out. And the next thing I remember was the morning that he kicked. And I was like, what the heck is that? You know? And because I'm only 18, and I'm just like, oh my. I wasn't really showing a whole lot. I mean, I was still very active, running and everything, you know. And so, yeah, when that happened, that you know, changed my whole life. And so that was it was almost like he saved me, so to speak. And you know, the rest is history, as they say. But yeah, I wouldn't change that day, although I would love for the nightmares to stop. But you know, the PTSD is there. It's not, you know, it's not going anywhere. And that's another thing. They don't understand the trauma that they cause. And I like what you said about the not staying in the marriage, because that's what I did in mine. I stayed because that's what my birth giver was telling me to do. What the heck are you going to do single with 4 kids? How are you going to take care of them? How are you going to support yourselves? You know, what are you going to do? You need to stay with him. And that was the only time I ever listened to her. And I'm like, what the heck was I thinking? But I was listening to the fact that she's right. I mean, I do have 4 kids. And what the heck am I going to do? You know? So I went into panic mode and I stayed. I stayed. And then we end up splitting up, and instead of staying in the kids' lives, he just left, you know, and never looked back. And he walked out 2004 Mother's Day, and my kids have only seen him 3 times since then.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And for the longest time, I blamed me. For the longest time, I was like, it's my fault. You know, if I would have stayed, he would have still been in their life. And then I woke up one day and I realized it wasn't my fault. He didn't want to be a husband. He didn't want to be a father. He left and he went on about his life, started a whole new family.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't have any kids with her or nothing like that. I mean, I'm the only one with kids, but it's not the point. You became stepdad to her kids, but didn't have anything to do with your own. So trauma is all around us in our community, you know, and it was weird because I didn't expect that from him because of how his mother raised him. She was very family oriented. So I was totally, till this day, I'm still shocked that it happened because of how his mother was about family. So for somebody that might be watching, and they don't like therapy, or they don't want to go to therapy, or therapy's not for them, but they have some baggage that they need to unpack. What kind of advice would you give them?
I would start off by telling them to do a couple of activities, and one being an activity that I call downloading. And that's where every thought that they are thinking, when they wake up in the morning and they are getting ready to go to work, go to school, wherever they're going to go, whatever thoughts that they have in their mind, just start speaking those things out loud. okay? And for some people, they have to record themselves
Mm-hmm.
so that they can actually hear it, because that's going to kind of tell you a little bit about some of the areas that you may be stuck in, number one. The second thing I would like to suggest to them to do is to start journaling. And journaling could be something you can record on your phone. It could be something for those of you that like to write. Just write down. And even if you don't know what to say, just write down, I don't know what to say. Okay?
Just
And
write something.
write something. And you decide that how often you want to do that. Do you want to do it every day? Do you want to do it twice a week? Whatever. You decide, but be persistent and continue to do that. I also like to suggest another technique that I utilize a lot, and that is creating a vision board. Okay? And the vision could be like, for example, maybe the theme may be, I want to start liking myself. Okay? And then you start drawing or cutting out images or whatever you want to do that reflect what it looks like for you to start liking yourself. Because many of us that have been victims of any type of trauma tend to utilize our sense of eyesight or visual more than any other sight out there. And so if you see what it's going to look like or what it looks like to you to like yourself, you're going to start noticing things around you that features the same things that you have on this vision board. And you want to put this vision board in a place that you see on a regular basis, you know, wherever that may be, in your home or your workplace or whatever the case may be. And then some people, what they do is they have Post-it notes and they write down something positive about themselves. You may not believe it today. That's okay. Because I guarantee you that if you look at it, read it, and speak it out loud on a continual basis, there will be a day where you will believe those things. Like for me, I thought I was ugly. And even to this day, I still have a post note that I read that says, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I read that
I know that's
often.
right.
Yes. And that helps you, you know, to be able not only to like yourself, but believe in yourself, and to be able not to see yourself as this invisible person that nobody wants to have anything to do with.
I
So that
love
would be
it.
And then for others, you know, you may want to just have someone you can actually talk to. So if you don't necessarily believe in this, the therapy part, like I said earlier, go to support groups. They're free. Others of you may want to call a crisis hotline in your community. I know out here on the West Coast where I'm at that we dial 211. So you might need to Google and find out what those places are. Other people, what they will do is they will go on websites of local domestic violence agencies in their area. And one good thing about that is that if you happen, because cyber abuse is really rampant, but if you go on their website, if you go on their websites, the majority of them look for this escape button. And when you go push that escape button, what it does, it automatically takes you out of that site. So if your partner comes and gets on your computer, your phone, and trying to find out what was the site that you just recently visited, it's not going to show. So.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So and that gives you a lot of good information. The top different types of trauma women encounters, you know, and of course domestic violence is what I look at the center stone that leads into all other types of trauma that we as women face. So
yes. Well, look, I appreciate you sitting down with me today. So before we close out, what are some things that you want to convey to people and get out to people in reference to mental health?
Okay. So mental health is something that you by yourself are not encountering. The majority of us have some form of mental health. The difference is some have labels associated with it, others do not. I had a therapist friend tell me one time we all can relate to some form of mental health diagnosis that's found in the DSM-5. But you know, when I say you're labeled with it, you actually saw a therapist that said, okay, you have PTSD or battered women syndrome, or whatever the case may be, where someone that didn't go through the same method you have, they're exhibiting the same symptoms, but they just don't have a diagnosis associated with it because they're not seeing a professional. And so you're not alone, basically, is the moral of the story. Is you're not alone. You will never be alone. And there's people out there that's willing to help you. But I always like to put a disclaimer out there. And the disclaimer is they may not help you the way you want to be helped. And what I mean by that is maybe what they could be doing is holding you accountable for you to do the homework and for you to see yourself different. Right. And that's the hard part to accept.
Yes. Like the journaling, I haven't started it yet. I did it once. And then I think about a couple months later, I wrote one on another sheet of paper. And that is the hardest, and I don't know why, but it's the hardest thing for me to start doing. Right. And I've, because I follow a lot of Black-owned businesses. So there's a couple of people have journals. And so they've mailed me the journals. I've got the journals, but putting pen to paper, right. I don't know what it is. But see, the whole time you and I have been talking, I've been able to, jot down little things about this conversation, right. But trying to start the journaling, I don't know what it is. Or It's not the start. I start, but then I don't continue. I'm not consistent. I'll put it that way. That's what it is. I'm not consistent. I'm not journaling every day. The therapist that I had, that's what she said. She was like, pick a time every day and just make that your journal time, Right. And so then I had established that, I start winding down around 6 p.m. And so around 7 o'clock would be my journal time. Right. And I did it a couple of days. Right. And then I haven't taken the dang thing back out yet. And I'm just like, what the heck is wrong with me that I can't just sit down and do it every night before I go to bed?
Well, consistency is part of our healing. We have to be consistent. And so you get a specialized journal if you don't have one. Keep it in a special safe spot and just write down, I don't know what to say, your journaling. Okay? And then the next thing is, like, if you're afraid of what you're going to write, you can develop code words. Like, for example, I've had, and I still have it today, an attitude where sometimes I'll sit there and say, oh, I'm so stupid. I don't want to say that about myself because that's degrading me. So what I'll do is I'll write in my journal, I'm so silly. Mm-hmm. So you develop whatever code words work for you. Nobody will know what that means but you, and because you developed it. So it's once again, most of us are visual. We use our visual sense more than any other, and we have to see it. And the reason why we have to see it, because that's what helps us to grow. Because we look at the patterns, how we believe about ourselves, how we identify ourselves, and then we have to make a decision. Do I want to stay with those patterns, or do I want to change them?
Gotcha. All right. Well, we unpacked a lot today.
And if you don't, I want to say one more thing, excuse me. If you don't want to write it down, speak it in your phone. That's journaling.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Talk text.
Yes.
Or you can, now you can talk into a Word document, so yeah, that works too.
Yes. Yes.
So now tell everybody where they can get your workbook and how they can, while you're talking, I'm going to be typing all of your information into the thing as well, but let everybody know what you do, because we did it at the beginning. So let everybody know what you do and where they can find you. And, yes, ma'am, that's what we're doing.
Okay, so I'm a life coach, empowerment coach, and I help women that are stuck and have a low self-esteem about themselves, but they have a dream and they want to be able to fulfill this dream. And so I help empower them to get to that point to fulfill their dream. And you can find me on www. And I'm going to spell it for you, ARMEMPCO.com. And then you can find my book, When the Kisses Stop, A Tale of Lessons Learned, on Amazon.com.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Well, thank you for hanging out with me today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Crystal. It was really good being with you, too. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. I will reach out to you soon.
Okay, you take care. Bye-bye.
Yes, ma'am. You too. Thank you.
And thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, let me see here. Because this thing isn't, what is it doing?